Welcome everybody to our EXO User Group Forum 2021. Nice to see you. I'm Grant Harwood and I'll be your MC today. As you know, our theme for today's forum is the connected business, complete control. And as I say, it's great to see you all here in a COVID sort of mode as we've all got used to. Firstly, just want to thank our sponsors, major sponsors, Emprise, Kilimanjaro Consulting, Easy Collect and Expense Manager, and you'll learn more about those last two as in the show as great MYOB products. Add-on products for MYOB EXO. So also a special welcome, of course, to we've got some very senior people from MYOB coming in that control the product and control the teams that run your product, so that's going to be great. So we do have a really good agenda, as you can see here. Have a quick look at that. That's what's coming up. And as I say, you'll get an understanding of what's happening in the product you use or potentially use, and the people behind it and what's coming up on its roadmap. We also have some business key speakers on business topics. As I said, leadership being one of them. You'll see Kim Clark shortly, and also just on what's in the business environment. So there's a little bit more than just on EXO, which is great. So if you have any questions as we go through, please just hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen there in Zoom. Just click it and type away. We will answer those at the end of the session. So please don't hesitate. If something comes to mind, fire it in there. We'd love to answer it. We'll have our panel at the end, all our experts, and they'll be able to show. Also, during the forum today, we're going to have the odd little poll that will pop up. We need your opinion. We'd love your opinion in these polls. So just tell us what you're thinking about potentially the topic that may be on. So if you see that, do participate. We really would love to have your input into that, because today user groups are all about you, the users, and how you can get the most and more out of the product you've got. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Ronnie Baskind is the Kilimanjaro's founder and CEO, and also the CEO of the new consulting group, which is Kilimanjaro Consulting and Enterprise Solutions New Zealand. So we're now one entity, and that's a subsidiary of Enterprise Group. It's my real pleasure to welcome Ronnie to the stage, so to speak. He will open the forum and welcome you all. And thanks again. Over to you, Ronnie.
Thanks, Grant. On behalf then of Kilimanjaro and Enterprise, both entities, as Grant said, now a combined entity, thank you all for attending again today, and thanks to the organizers for allowing us to be the main sponsor once again. I'd also like to thank everybody that's been involved in organizing this. The logistics are quite confronting, especially when doing an online event such as this, quite different to the physical event. So thanks to everybody for doing that. And then a special welcome to Kim Clark, who is going to talk to us about building high performance teams as evidenced by what she has done at MYOB in quite a short period of time. Now I'm going to share my screen. If you just give me one moment, let me just do that. Right, okay. So they say that hindsight is an exact science, and it left me wondering whether the present COVID-19 pandemic is going to have a lasting influence on our society and on business, or whether it is simply going to be a passing event, such as the passing of Halley's Comet. I don't know if anybody here would remember, that was 1986. I think if you live long enough, you might see it pass by again. But no lasting impact. It just happens, flash in the pan, and then it disappears. Or are we actually at some sort of an inflection point in our society where you have a major change in the way society behaves? If you look back, you'll see that these inflection points generally span a long period of time. In other words, it's not a single event that changes the way humans behave. You look at the Renaissance, which went on from the 14th to the 17th centuries, the Agrarian Revolution, which in similar fashion was over a period of 200 years that you went essentially from subsistence agriculture to a more commercial type of agriculture. You look at the Industrial Revolution, which itself had an impact on the Agrarian Revolution as well, but also lasted for over 100 years. And we saw the technology changing, not only in agriculture, but in the birth of industry and so on. The Digital Revolution, which is what we're living through at the moment and that we're concerned with, again, an impact on agriculture where you've got GPS-enabled precision farming, but the Bioengineering Revolution, which is just really in its infancy. Again, I just point to how these different events overlap and impact on each other. So the question then really is this an inflection point in history? Now, I may have shown this slide before. It was produced by Solution6, or Exonet as it used to be called, then in 2005, where the cross in the middle over there is where we were in 2005. So if you think back to that time, traditional business applications, fax machines were still around at that point, and some clever people at Solution6 had said over time what will happen is that we will move towards this e-business enabled environment. And certainly that's what's happened over time, and that's what's happening. And there are a couple of things to think about when you look back on that. The first one is that software or IT or technology evolves over time. Again, not a flash in the pan event. It happens over time, and you can see what happens. Somebody comes up with a brilliant idea is that we're going to cross a television set with a telephone, and you then have, for example, the birth of Skype in 2003, and that goes through a series of evolutions, and you had MS Teams released in 2017. So the point is that the technology already existed, and it was the market that changed pre-COVID and post-COVID. And the technologies that we're using now were actually there. But what happened was that an acceleration of the adoption of those technologies, an acceleration in the development of those technologies, and a reduction in cost of those technologies. And I'll give a couple of examples of what that looks like. So a week or so ago, Andy Penn, who is the CEO of Telstra, had said we witnessed 5 years worth of digitization in a few short weeks at the start of COVID. And he was talking there about the adoption of digitization, not necessarily about the creation of new digitization. If you look at the adoption of Skype, then you can see that it took Skype from 2007 to 2013 to gain 60 million users. If you look at the adoption of Microsoft Teams, you'll see that it took Microsoft Teams from the beginning of COVID, which was March 2020, until October 2020, gained about 80 million users in that short period of time. And you can see Zoom, the growth of Zoom was even more dramatic than that. There's a good example here from Acumatica. As you know, Acumatica is the underlying engine of MYOB Advanced. And this was from John Roskill recently. He said, we have a health and beauty company. They didn't grow by 30%. Obviously, 30% would have been a very healthy growth rate for any company in any given year. But this company grew by 3,000% in 30 days, and which is pretty remarkable as a result of COVID-19. The fact that they were on a scalable platform obviously also helped. To illustrate the costs coming down, this is the other point that I made, is that technology gets adopted more quickly and the costs come down. If you think back again to 2005, when you had your first website, if you wanted to have a commercially or an e-commerce enabled website 5 years ago, never mind 2005, just 5 years ago, would have cost you $15,000 to $25,000, where today you can have a respectable e-commerce enabled website from Shopify for as little as $29 a month. So amazing how that's changed. The question for the group here today is, are you leaders or are you followers? Because in business, keeping up with your competitors or staying ahead of your competitors is what it's all about. We know that as business grows, business becomes more complex. And we also know that you are on the right-hand side of this continuum. Business growth is not linear. You go through these phases, you plateau, you go to the next phase, you plateau. And you are in the top 2 or 3% of businesses in terms of that. If you look at Australian statistics, you can see there that there are very, very few companies that get beyond a $5 million turnover. In terms of today's audience, you would all be beyond that. In terms of the New Zealand statistics, very, very similar. You're in the top 3%. And you can see that it drops off very, very quickly when you get beyond the sort of 20 employees. So you are in the top 3% of businesses in both Australia and New Zealand. And this gives you your competitive advantage because you've been early adopters of technology, early adopters of SaaS systems. But what's happened because of COVID is that your competitors have been triggered because of fear and risk and change in circumstances. Your competitors have been triggered to adopt that technology, which otherwise they might have taken years to adopt. They've now adopted in a couple of months. So you've essentially have to keep moving to stay ahead of them. And that, I think, is the lesson for today. Don't lose your competitive advantage. Keep moving and keep using the technology to improve efficiency in your business. And that means continuous and incremental business process improvement, which we can obviously help you with. In terms of today's session, again, we're looking at the right-hand side of this chart because you've moved towards the right-hand side. We know that you're looking at it, or you're using MYOB Advanced because these are the things that you're using to drive your business: reporting, control, compliance, separation of responsibilities. And the control is what today's session is about, is utilizing your system to have control over your business. I don't have a crystal ball, but just looking ahead, I think we are still social animals. People do want to return to the office, at least in some way. So you'll have this hybrid work flexibility, work from home, virtual teams. It's very important then to build high performance teams because it's a different environment. You will move towards real-time information across your organization, accessible from anywhere when people are working as these remote distributed teams. You'll need to protect your supply chains, and we learned those lessons very, very severely during the COVID-19 period. And then, of course, business travel and online events are the new normal. So with that, I will hand back to Grant and say, enjoy yourselves today. There's an enormous amount of information being presented by a range of different presenters. Try and stay engaged. It's not always easy. And when I look at those video clips that were played at the beginning, that's what it looked like in the good old days. So thank you very much, and back to you, Grant.